been an unbelievable tournament so far, highlighted by yesterday's marquee matchup, the quarterfinal matchup we'd all been waiting for, we'd all been craving and salivating. Two icons, two goats of the sport, Rafael Nadal and Novak Djokovic, met in the quarterfinal yesterday, and the King of Clay backed up and corroborated his moniker. Rafael Nadal defeated Novak Djokovic in the quarterfinals yesterday, 6-2, 4-6, 6-2, and 7-6, 7-4 in the tiebreak, arguably beating his most bitter rival, not to mention the reigning and defending French Open champion, in a match that lasted about 4 hours and 12 minutes, which is to be expected between these two gentlemen. Typically, when there's some combination of Nadal, Federer, Djokovic, and Nadal, these matches tend to go at least 4 sets. And if they are over 4 sets, or even if they're 3 sets, they last an extremely long amount of time. They extend, and the duration just continues to build on itself. And it doesn't disappoint. It never disappoints. It didn't disappoint yesterday. It was absolutely sensational tennis. I think both of these guys obviously are special. That's an understatement. But the quality of tennis that we saw yesterday was just spectacular. Every single point, every game was tremendous. The average rally, I think in the first set, was about 12 to 14 shots. The first set and a half took over 2 hours to complete. And again, this is what you would expect when you watch both of these two guys. The only disappointment that I had, and I'd mentioned this on Monday, was the fact that we were getting this matchup in the quarterfinals as opposed to the semifinals or even the finals, because it had the aura of a finals matchup in a Grand Slam. And obviously, this is a surface that Rafael Nadal has bested pretty much every single opponent he's faced. Djokovic has gotten the better of him a couple of times, including last year. But when you really watch this match, and fortunately I got a chance to sit down and watch the entire thing, Rafael Nadal really dominated the majority of this match. If you are watching this through an objective lens, with the exception of a few stretches that I'll highlight, for the first 2.5 sets, Nadal absolutely was dominating Djokovic. Obviously, we see it in the score, 6-2 in the first set, 6-2 in the third set. But if you weren't watching the match and you just saw the score, you're saying to yourself, well, Djokovic must have battled back in the second set, and to a degree he did, but Nadal led 3-0 in the second set, and he was serving for the game. He was on serve. And Djokovic, to his credit, found a little extra gas in the propane tank and managed to begin a little bit of a surgence here. Breaks Nadal, trailing 3-0. Then rattles off 5 of the next 6 games to pull out a 6-4 unlikely second set. And that was just one of several instances in which Djokovic was showing that type of resolve, was showing that type of championship mettle. And to his credit, as much as he wanted to compliment Rafael Nadal for showing why he is the great champion that he is, and obviously I'm going to praise Rafael Nadal immensely, but Novak Djokovic showed you just why he's a great champion as well. And this is what makes these two legends absolutely spectacular. It's not just the incredible competitive will and determination to win, but it's the fact that they also have the talent to match and to back it up and to actually allow them to overcome these adverse situations. Because there are a lot of tennis players on the tour that exhibit tremendous will, that are passionate, that are infatuated with the game of tennis, and they have a burning desire to win, but most of the time They simply lack the talent to overcome those large deficits. The actual talent level of these two gentlemen is unmatched. It's unparalleled. And again, with Djokovic, as much as he was praising Rafael Nadal for that championship medal, he exhibited it on numerous occasions. Obviously, I highlighted how in the second set he battled back down 3-0, facing a break point, returning, and he still managed to break Rafael Nadal and then again rattle off 5 of the next 6 games. But it's more than that. He's trailing 2-1, fourth set. Jumps out to a 4-1 lead, a 5-2 lead. Nadal battles all the way back to his credit and sends it into a tiebreak. Djokovic is down 6-1 in the tiebreak, at least battles back to make it 6-4, a respectable tiebreak score. So these are just a couple of examples in which Djokovic, to his credit, never caved, never acquiesced a single time. But that's what makes this matchup so intriguing, is the fact that when you're facing two of the legends in the sport, there is no room for error. There's no margin for error. And Nadal showed just why clay has been a sanctuary, has been a safe haven for tennis for him, because he musters up little doses of energy when it seems unlikely, and he manages to channel that into victory. Just had another spirited effort yesterday. Again, he should have won the second set, blew that one. Then in the fourth set, when he was really facing some adversity and the threat of potentially this match going to a fifth set, which would have been the second consecutive match that he has went the distance, he didn't buckle. Again, trailing 4-1, 5-2. Wins his serve 5-3, breaks Djokovic to make it 5-4, ties it up at 5 apiece, and then really just went on a tear in the tiebreak, scorched out to a 6-1 start, and never looked back. But to me, this felt personal for Nadal. This had the writings of exacting some revenge written all over it. And it's not to say that Nadal was harboring any bad will or any animosity towards Djokovic, but the reality is last season he was battling chronic foot pain throughout the entire French Open, and ultimately after he exacerbated it against Djokovic in the semifinals of the French Open last year, that's what forced him to be sidelined for about half a year. And obviously Djokovic, to his credit, took advantage of it. But Nadal's probably thinking in the back of his mind, hey, if my foot isn't hurt, I likely win that match. Remember, he won the first set in that match, then dropped 3 consecutive sets. So Djokovic, I've always contended, is the most versatile tennis player that I've ever seen. And there's a strong argument to be made that he's the most athletic tennis player that I've ever seen. And yet, with all of that, Nadal is a sensational athlete, and what he does on clay, on the surface of clay, the movement, he made Novak Djokovic somehow look ordinary and slow on clay. That's how fast Nadal moved on clay. His movement is a form of art. It's absolutely beautiful to watch. There's a beautiful rhythm and flow and elegance to it. His ability to hit all of these inside out forehands. Every time there was a ball about 50-50 down the middle, or even 2/3 of the way to his backhand, he was backpedaling all the way, running around that backhand to hit that inside out forehand, delivering knockout blows. And he's been doing that throughout his entire career, but this is the one surface where you really see it on the forefront. It's just his movement on clay is unrivaled. It really, really is. And now overall, you look at this matchup between these two legends, and Nadal's closed the gap to 1. Djokovic leads the all-time series 30-29 At Roland Garros, though, Nadal leads at 8-2. Leads at 8-2. And as much as we as tennis fans have been led to believe that the greatest rivalry in the sport of tennis is Federer and Nadal, the truth of the matter is this is the greatest rivalry in the sport, Nadal and Djokovic, because these two guys have met more than any other two opponents in tennis history. This was their 59th meeting. Not to mention these two are legitimate contemporaries. Federer has always been about 5 to 6 years older than Nadal and Djokovic, but Nadal's 35, Djokovic is 35. Now Nadal's going to be turning 36 on Friday. But the point is, they're legitimate contemporaries. These two guys literally have risen at the same exact time. Nadal obviously saw a little bit more early success than Djokovic. It took Djokovic a couple of years on the tour to get his bearings and to find that consistency, which is the impressive thing about both of these two guys. And now Nadal is 110-3 at Roland Garros all time. They've already erected a statue of him outside of Court Philip. I believe that's the center court, or Philippe Quartet, however you pronounce it in French, with the French accent. Apologies if you were expecting a great French accent in this moment. Couldn't deliver that one for you. But the fact of the matter is they've erected a statue for Nadal, and he's still playing. He's an active tennis player. Normally you erect statues for guys that have passed away or have retired. And he's still playing, and he is on the verge of reaching another Grand Slam title at Roland Garros. He's on the verge of capturing his 14th French Open title. And I was highly anticipating this matchup, and it lived up to the billing, as it always does. These two gentlemen never disappoint in that regard. They represent the sport with the utmost class, at least when they face one another. And again, as I mentioned, the great disappointment was the fact that this was just a quarterfinal matchup as opposed to a semifinal or an actual final matchup. Not to mention what was impressive, that's going to just fly under the radar of most tennis fans, was the temperature was 60 degrees Fahrenheit in France. Now, why is that important? Well, that's important because the colder it is, the less the ball is going to be able to travel and the less pop it's going to get when it bounces. So these two gentlemen are whacking all these balls, but it's not getting the same kind of bounce as it normally would if the temperature is a little bit hotter, where the ball can travel a little bit more through the air. It doesn't bounce nearly as high in colder temperatures. So it was an incredible match to watch. And I've said this before, and this is not a political statement. This is the truth of the matter. This is the reality. Nadal benefited so greatly from the fact that Djokovic wasn't allowed to play in the Australian Open. That's how Nadal captured his 21st Grand Slam. And I know that Djokovic says he doesn't regret not getting vaccinated to have played and participated in that tournament, and perhaps he stands by it. But man, if you're Djokovic, you're sitting right now either in your hotel with your wife, with your family, and he's got to be thinking to himself, man, if I just put my pride and my ego aside and I just got vaccinated, I likely would have had 21 Grand Slams. I believe that Djokovic was at the peak of his powers. Nadal was returning to his first major tournament after a 6-month hiatus. Who knows? He was a little bit shaky during stretches of the Australian Open this past January. If Djokovic gets vaccinated and is able to play, he likely has 21 Grand Slams. And now it changes completely the narrative heading into this French Open. But obviously, you can't rewrite history. It is what it is. And now Nadal is really on the verge of stepping on Djokovic and Federer's proverbial necks and stretching his Grand Slam singles titles lead. He's closing on a number 22. He's closing in on number 22. Can't wait to watch the rest of the tournament.